give me the number one reason why you should still invest in cannabis. What would you say to that? Hey everyone, welcome to this TDR Cannabis Exclusive. We bring in a big name from the industry. He is CNBC on-air host and Chief Investment Officer of Seymour Asset Management and manager of the cannabis ETF CNBS. Tim Seymour, back to the podcast. Good to see you, sir. How are things?
Hey, Shad. Great to be here. Great to be with both of you guys this morning.
Anthony, good to see you. How was the weekend, sir?
Good to see you as well. A lot of sun, actually. It was completely different than last weekend. It's good to get out on the course.
Just rubbing it in our face, right, Sam? Just rubbing it in our face.
Yeah, look, we all make choices in life. I mean, there's a reason why I'm sitting in New York. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. But if I wanted to live on the beach, I would be.
Yeah.
So one day I will be, but not today.
Not today. How's the city? Rangers playing the Devils. That heated rivalry looks like a good series so far.
Yeah, the Battle of the Hudson has been so far kind of largely what it was supposed to be. If you're a Ranger fan, the first two games were a runaway train. The game Saturday night was a kind of reality check that nothing's easy in the NHL playoffs, and that's why the NHL playoffs are one of the great sporting marathons in sports. And if you're not even a hockey fan, I encourage you to just kind of lock in for it. So it is fun. It is spring in New York. A lot of New Yorkers will tell you this has a feel a little bit of like 1994 when the Knicks and the Rangers both went. Rangers won the Cup. Knicks went to the NBA Finals. That's a huge wish at this point and where we are. We're really early, but the teams both the Rangers have enough talent to go far, and that doesn't mean anything in the NHL. Yeah. And again, it's a war. The Knicks, I think we're psyched because this team wasn't supposed to do a lot. It's got great character. The Garden's rocking. I'll be at the Garden tonight for the Ranger game. So fun times in New York.
94. Is that the Knicks Rockets final?
Knicks Rockets final, and it's one Charles Smith bad weak soft dunk attempt away from them both winning, and it being a storybook. Now it's kind of an asterisk that people forget about. But I'm an old guy now. In '94, I was a couple years out of college, like my first job on Wall Street.
Yeah.
It was pre 9/11. The world was free. You know what I mean? It was a fun time in New York City, and we were enjoying that moment. And frankly, those athletes on those two teams were both very part of the fabric of the city. They were out and about. I was running into the Rangers. There was a bar on the Upper East Side called the Auction House where these guys hung out. And we
what
as we
life.
Say, yeah, it was an
Good
amazing time.
Life. Were you around Matthew McConaughey, doing the little first?
Look, so let's just be clear. I can't throw much shade at McConaughey. I have a slightly different style, and probably the only guy that gets away with his, is McConaughey. So,
right.
I mean, if I tried that, if I sat in the lotus position, topless, in a bar, and chicks wouldn't be walking up to me and hanging out, they would be throwing stuff at me. So only he gets away with that.
Come on, you're a Georgetown grad. They love their Georgetown Hoyas.
Yeah, if it was only that easy, man. But
listen, wanted to have you on. We been 2 weeks since we were down in Miami at the Benzinga Conference. I described it as, look, fundamentals. There's some encouragement. Numbers continue to grow. I think this industry or the event this year was somewhat somber in comparison to years past. But what do you think if for our viewers? You're one of the most respected voices in the industry. You're down there every year moderating a lot of these panels, speaking to the biggest names. What would you say was the big takeaway for you pertaining to the actual conference while you were there?
Well, you're kind of say all that. I think, there's a lot of people in the industry that have different perspectives and different platforms and different, obviously, roles as whether they're operators, whether they are influencers, whether they are truly people that have helped make change in the cannabis space. I mean, my position as an investor, as somebody that's been investing in cannabis from its early stages and kind of looking at it with the same institutional lens that I know all the other asset classes I've looked at as an emerging markets guy and whatnot. So with that lens and looking at what went down over those few days in Miami, where Benzinga does throw this great event every year, it really has become kind of the industry standard. It's frankly a lot more it's just a lot more easy to navigate than say MJ Biz, which is kind of a food fight out in Las Vegas, even though Vegas is fun. So what's nice about this is you really have the entire industry, and that's operators, that's investors, that's again the people that are strategics, people that are thinking about it, and then retail investors, all kind of meshed up in one place. What I would define as really important elements of last week were, first of all, obviously a major reset in terms of expectations. That's good and bad, right? We've come from a place where expectations were high. There's always some sense that there's going to be a legislative event on the horizon. The reality is that this industry continues to grow, and I think that it doesn't necessarily grow with green lights everywhere saying this is how we want it to go. But the mood was, of course, balanced because it's been such a brutal time for the assets. But I do think if you listen to the operators, these guys are not talking about the 5 new states they're going to be in. They're not talking about the CapEx that's going into some new facility. It's really it's about industry price rationalization. Actually, listening to companies talk about how they're actually holding back supply because they are conscious of where they can have a role in the supply demand pricing dynamic. I just think that it actually feels like there's some type of both reality rational bottom being met with the present realities of an industry that is starved for capital, that has to conserve everything. But the great news, and I think you said this, cannabis's top line grows every year. And even in a world with some price deflation, but if you look at actually unit sales are really impressive. We all can get into margins and where gross margins are going to end up, where people think operating margins will be, and those are some of the big, I think, investor anxieties, things people don't understand about. But that's we are in a place where the industry is an addressable market, I would argue right now, of $100 billion. That's not scientific. That's me saying that in terms of adding up all the legal states that you have in terms of their adult and their medical markets, and then start to put some quantification on the illicit market. I mean, this is a massive industry that's growing globally. This is all good stuff. So that's my recap is. It was important to be there. It's important to see who's able to survive through this period. It's important to see where there are some types of investor groups, whether they distressed or special sits or credit guys. I mean, you have a different kind of a sophisticated investor at an event like this, which is also encouraging because obviously the other thing that's been going on is you've seen a bit of an outflow of not just prime brokers and custodians, but even how about the research coverage, like the analyst community? You're starting to see people shutter their coverage, like guys that were doing a nice job covering the sector being tapped on the shoulder saying, you know what, we're not going to do this. And those are usually the moments that define the bottoms, right? So we'll see.
Yeah. Anthony, you want to add to that?
I was surprised to see that. Yeah. I mean, I was surprised to see that when some of the guys got the axe in the research department over the last couple of weeks. But I don't know if you've seen this, Tim, but there's articles going around right now. Cannabis is actually it outpaced chocolate sales in 2022, hitting about 30 billion. I mean, where do you think we go from there? I mean, it's still hails in comparison to alcohol.
What's alcohol? What's alcohol?
Alcohol's around 300 billion.
It is, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, but that's beer, wine, and spirits, and I think that's probably. I think that's adding up even a lot of the periphery of it. But I think the point is well taken. By the way, if cannabis has surpassed chocolate, I mean, how about how about edibles? I mean, how about combine them? I mean, you got to believe the cannabis chocolate edibles are flying off the shelves. But I don't think anybody disputes where the industry is positioned from a consumption perspective, and that, and I'm sure I've said this to you, Shad. I feel like this is like my worst old joke in the cannabis space, but I'm the guy that drinks Coors Light not because it's a great beer, but because I can have 5 to 11 of them and still be the same guy I was when I started. And dropping that into the cannabis and the microdosing context, and where I think the crossover market truly is,
right,
of all the people out there that are not looking to see, they don't want 36% THC. They want something consistent. They want something to just chill on, and they want to get on a plane. They want to go to sleep. They want to do things that they'd be doing with a glass of wine or a beer. They're control freaks like me. And I think, that industry, that demographic, and it's across multi socioeconomic and age groups, is only, we've tapped the surface. So we're just in the beginning.
Yeah.
And this is, sometimes it's not very popular with kind of the hardcore cannabis crew, but the whole concept of, look, I've been to 113 dead shows in my day, but I mean, the whole concept of tie-dyes and glass bongs and freak flags, is not what's going to sell the industry.
No.
All right. It's not what's moving it. And it's about wellness, believe it or not. And again, all the brands out there in the early days of cannabis, I get it. Like, you had to come forward with some kind of science wellness thing. It's about people just relaxing, man. Like, why do you drink a Coors Light on a Saturday afternoon? Because you're not ready to, go hard at night, but it's your weekend or whatever. So
that's impressive.
That's the stuff that's great. Yeah,
you can polish off 5 or 11 Coors Lights and still be the same guy where you started. That's impressive.
Well, look, man, if I've had breakfast and lunch, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that I won't have probably be talking a little bit louder.
Talking about the Mets or anything like that.
Well, I mean,
talk about experiences. I look forward to going to the garden and getting a low dose cannabis beverage.
One of these days, one of these days, who knows when that's going to be? But and you're hitting on a segment that I think also is got real legs ahead of it. I mean, I think the beverage segment is going to be big. People like to drink. They like to drink anything. And like even I quit drinking for Lent every year, which is for people that don't know the Catholic Church. And it's, dare I say, I'm about to get struck down by lightning. It's sometimes it's less religion than it is, just doing it because it makes me feel good. But I even, I'll buy the Heineken Zeros, man. I like the taste of beer. Yeah. Like if you could drop some THC into a Heineken Zero, but the point is that I even will go to a bar and I'll have a couple. I mean, if I was hanging with you guys, probably by my third Heineken Zero, I'd be on my way home because there's only so much it's only so many laughs, Shad, but I mean, I do think that that segment is one of the most exciting places. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Last time we had you on, we were in Chicago at the Benzinga Conference back then, and you'd mentioned that you don't think safe banking will pass towards the end of the calendar year, which you were correct. Anthony and I were actually over at Jason Wild's place during Benzinga. He had a fundraiser, and Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips was there and was talking about how a lot of these executives should come to Washington, advocate for the industry. And one of the questions that got brought up was how we need to focus more on incremental versus comprehensive, and why a lot of the times nothing is getting passed through Congress because we're having this big comprehensive plan. Are you finding, are you agreeing with that? And do you think, in some ways, it maybe is a good idea for these executives to start advocating in Washington? Will it make a difference?
I was actually, I must have missed you at that party. I think I was microdosing somewhere else before I got there. It was a great event, and I heard some of the dialogue that was there. And Jason's actually done, I think, one of these the last couple of years. The year before, he had Nancy Mace there, also having a really thoughtful conversation about the industry. So, no question. Again, microdosing. How about just getting some points on the board? How about just some legislation? And I saw Cory Booker was out there yesterday, and certainly, on 420, saying that lawmakers are ready to, use the term resurrect a package of reform. It's hard to believe that, and it's hard to believe that the guy that stood behind the industry and said he was, going to be really the supporter of the industry, and is now pointing out that we got to pass something, otherwise, literally hundreds of businesses are going down. I mean, that's what he said, and there's no question that the industry needs to learn from itself in terms of not only who it leaned on for advocacy, but the voice that it's spoken. And I think it gets a little bit back even to my view about, just a little too much, a few too many tie-dye shirts and glass bongs, because I think that's not how stuff's going to get done at Washington.
Nope.
And I also, like many people that have been following the industry, I talk to the people that I talk to in DC, and most of the guys that I've spoken to never, ever, it's why I could be as at least clear as I could be, Shad. It's not like I had necessarily a crystal ball, but the reason I was so pessimistic on SAFE last year and the year before was I never got the sense that we were even that close. I know there was many votes, and I know that there was stuff going on, but it was easy, on the weekend, December 4th, before the industry walked in that Monday morning on December 5th and thought they were all but done on safe banking. It was easy for the DOJ that weekend to say, yeah, we've kind of reconciled our concerns about what's going on in the industry, when they knew they were standing over a dead body. They knew that was not going to pass. So it was easy for them to sound kind of rational and like we're of a place here. So I just think that the industry does need to take an incremental approach. Jason and TerraSend are trying to do something that at least I think has both call it practical and logistical, and obviously re-rating type things attached to it, which is getting a TSX listing. And I know they recently filed their proxy statement, and I know there are steps that they need to go through. But those are the kinds of things that actually the industry needs to slowly do. And I think then because I think the gray area of the legal dynamic where certain banks and custodians, for example, can play or not play is very gray right now. It's certainly defensible. And I think most people in the industry feel you don't even need a Cole Memo 2.0 to I mean, there's enough precedent here for institutions to be doing what they're doing, as long as they are steering clear of interstate and this and that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think those comments from that party on I guess that was Tuesday night down there were the right ones, and it's kind of cool to hear that there is different support within both chambers, frankly. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that was going on a couple of days right before we all got together in Miami was the news coming out of Kentucky that a Republican senator in the House in Kentucky, sponsored a bill that got support, and that Kentucky's got a medical program coming. I mean, you're talking about, kind of the flagship symbolic opposition state because of Mitch McConnell. It's a red state, and yet, they're going to have a medical program.
Yeah,
like that's the kind of stuff that's good news.
Yeah, that's a good. You mentioned that at
Great
the
news.
actually panel, but I don't think that got enough attention. Anthony, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, Kentucky's a great bright spot. There's also states like North Carolina that are trying to push medical right now. I guess what's your views on New Jersey and New York? Are we a long way away from a streamlined rollout of the system, or it's almost there?
Well, I think New Jersey, right, has been, of course, one of the bright spots and continues to be a place where a handful of companies are making their numbers and surpassing them. And, the news probably a week ago, was it a week ago today or 10 days ago today, where you got that headline about Curaleaf getting pushed back by the regulators. That's since been fortunately corrected, clarified, rolled back. And so New Jersey is right now one of the states where, the cynics will say, yeah, pricing's great now. It's just a matter of time when more capacity comes online. And the reality is it's going to take longer for it to come to roll out in New Jersey. So I think New Jersey remains strong. I think New York is of course extremely frustrating because of the role it plays in being a tastemaker and a brand creator. And obviously I own a gin mill. I own a bar in the West Village in New York City. And I can just tell you that, the density and the wallet that walks past that bar every day means, unless I'm a moron, I've got a pretty good business there. In cannabis, it's going to be extraordinary. It's always been a cannabis culture city. And the state, I think in certain regions is much like the rest of the country, is very much on board too. So, but it's a microcosm of the challenging social versus economic fight that goes on, and it will continue to. And you layer that into, again, New York is the largest city in the country in terms of its mass and density, maybe not in terms of its geography, but the problem of enforcement in New York City is exactly the same problem we have all around cities in the U.S. as well. And without enforcement, you're not going to get an industry that from the adult and rec and medical perspective is going to get the kind of support it needs to survive. Taxation needs to change. There needs to be a whole confluence of things. But I'm not terribly bullish on New York in the short to medium term in terms of this market. And we've seen the market's kind of spoken for itself in terms of what the assets are worth in New York. It was a time when people, the top tick was kind of the absurdity now in hindsight of the Hawthorne guys paying for Attain what they did. And right now, no one even really knows what these licenses are worth. Especially in a world where even if you are a social license holder on the retail side, what is the product you have access to? Like, what are you going to put on your shelves? So it's complicated. Like, as we know, and as I heard so many times in Miami last week, this is the most complicated industry to try to navigate as an operator and as an investor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess as an investor, I mean, I think I met you probably back in 2017 when this thing was just getting cooking. I mean, from a capital allocation perspective, are you seeing anything that's like exciting you anymore? I mean, I know we used to see like private deals like every other day up and down the value chain. What's exciting you from like a capital allocation perspective nowadays?
I guess it's seeing sophisticated, structured equity and debt guys, understanding that there's intrinsic value here, and that there are assets that are worth more than they are on paper. This concept of, and I know I mentioned this on my panel, and it's me just starting to do some work on it. But I've had 2 or 3 guys that sit in the middle of the NOL space, net operating loss structures. So credit guys that buy up shell companies that have losses on the books to be able to use them to offset taxable income in other industries. Now, fundamentally, structurally, that doesn't really solve the 280E issue on the retail side, but I think it does tell you that there's thoughtful guys going at it right now. Where I think we're now at that place. I think the fact that you've seen a couple deals come out of receivership where assets have changed hands is very interesting. These guys at MariMed, who I actually have a business relationship with, they did a really interesting deal in Massachusetts. Great. Where, I mean, ultimately these are like earnouts. These are like people that are throwing the keys and have no choice. And people that are good operators and are in a position to be very opportunistic, So I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. I like the fact that the bar's been set so low here, and I do think that the industry doesn't need a lot for people to have a great return profile at some point. Like I'm in this for the long haul. I've been running this ETF for 3 years, actually for 4 years now almost, and I've been involved on the private equity and even the public equity side and the kind of the hedge fund space for even longer. And I expect, as painful as it is right now, that this is a place that's going to be a huge destination for capital at some point. And I did say this on my panel, and I say this all the time on CNBC. So apologies, folks. But you make the most money when things go from terrible to just bad. That's when things go up 100% before they've even done anything. So we were probably we could have all been having this conversation 2 years ago But certainly a year ago, saying, "Oh boy, this is a great time to get in." Well, I mean, what's really fascinating and unfortunate, I mean, Curaleaf is down 40% from March. Like we're not even talking about. I'm not talking about since the DOJ announcement. I'm talking about the biggest cannabis company is down 40% in the last 8 weeks. Wow. And so it's fascinating. You frankly have had really interesting dispersion between the biggest cannabis players. And again, it's all relative. But if you look at this industry, the largest 6 or 7 players are billion-dollar companies. They're not $20 billion companies, but they are real companies. And the dispersion even amongst those players, you've got Curaleaf down over 45%. You've got GTII down about 15%. You've got TerraSend up 40%. I mean, it's all over the map.
So let me ask you, because last time you were on with us, you'd mentioned how Curaleaf was your biggest position.
Yep.
We've had some interesting conversations. People like Matt Hawkins were on, some really good, questions and feedback that he was providing. But upcoming debt cliffs for some of these larger MSOs, and the big narrative right now is forget about market share. It's all about producing profit. That's where we are right now for a lot of these companies. So you brought up, and like full disclosure, MariMed is a client of ours, but you brought up MariMed and some of these smaller companies that are really, from a pure business fundamentals, are knocking it out of the park and are quietly going about, their job without a lot of people knowing about what they're actually doing. But has your strategy tweaked at all? Because you're saying some of these stocks have been down 30, 40% in the last couple of months. But when we look at smaller players that are doing a really good job, it just appeared that the largest 4 or 5 MSOs were at the forefront as far as put money in these 4 or 5 companies and just, don't look at it for a couple of years. But I feel like a lot of people's strategies have changed. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think people's strategies have changed. Maybe they should have changed. I do think you've got a case where, some companies have focused on operations, companies have focused more on the footprint and the asset base. And I mean, Curaleaf from day one was a geographic footprint play, right? And at this point, both through some attrition and also it's through some portfolio management. GTI is our largest position. Curaleaf is certainly near there, and I think if the industry works, Curaleaf is going to work. GTI. I think has shown that they can be profitable in the states that they operate in, and I think that there is again an approach to both the process and the asset base and the brand, and I think that's important. MariMed, who again, I have a relationship with too. I've known the company for a long time, and what's interesting about a company like that is they were one of the first companies that were out there helping other companies get licensed. So they were playing consultant and advisor, and they were helping people register. And so these guys in the competitive licensing process are some of the most talented guys in the industry and have been from the early days. Yeah. In fact, I think MariMed is really their worst step, and it's easy to see in hindsight. Was the Gen Canna fiasco, the whole CBD dynamic, and everybody was lured by what seemed to be the way to get to market. And anyway, so companies that are able to look at the current environment and be patient and say we don't need to do anything here, or we could do something here, but we'll more likely these people are going to want to partner with us, and they can do it in a way that's asset light, I think is clearly how you should be assessing.
Is there anyone outside of MariMed that's grabbing your interest or attention?
Well,
GTI, you said, is your largest position.
I tell you what, I mean, I think there are a lot of questions at Trulieve about their margin profile and what they're doing outside of Florida, and but this in 2022 was a major underperformer. And I have to tell you, I mean, if you look around the map and you are playing the asset game and the geography game, I mean, Florida is one of the few states that's working, and it's working well. And I like Trulieve here. and I think they've continued to evolve with the industry, and they at times were, of course, at the front of the line in terms of the consolidation and the M&A and the Harvest deal and all that. There was some fat on that deal. There were some things to do. There's been some issues internally that Curaleaf has had to answer to, and maybe still hasn't. But I look at the industry, and I look at a combination of good assets, valuation and multiples at least, and balance sheet, and I think that's a place where again, at least the bigger companies, there may be debt overhangs, and hurdles and deadlines that are coming up, but it's not a question of whether they're going to be able to refi this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's another name that I think actually looks kind of interesting here.
Okay.
Are you looking abroad
pretty
at
much
all?
wrapped.
Or still too?
Go ahead.
Still too. Are
Say
you
it again?
looking abroad at all, like Europe, South America, any like international, like emerging markets, or kind of just letting those develop as they're all kind of really, they've got the ball rolling, but they haven't really been able to hit their stride yet?
Yeah, I think there's a couple guys in Europe that I've been watching, and it's really more just through my industry network that I am aware of a Swiss company that's doing 35 million and top line and a couple million in EBITDA, in like CBD that's moving into THC, and like the way that industry is evolving is exciting to me. I think there's also a rationalization that's existed. One of the things I think investors I need to urge, especially some of the folks that have been around the cannabis industry for a while, that were quick to poo-poo Europe because they were so put off by, understandably, some of the proclamations of Tilray 1.0, not Tilray 2.0, but Aurora, and these companies that said they had huge businesses in Portugal and in Macedonia, and it was like, what was this?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, look, the German pharma market is one of the most profitable markets in the world, and I think that will be a place that investors are going to want to be. It is a global industry.
Yeah.
Tilray 2.0, I think, has done actually a really nice job in Europe in their distribution business, and I think it's a meaningful part of their business now, without even having to be reliant on the the physical and the asset and the cultivation side. So very bullish. I've been a little more cynical on Latin America, and maybe that's because I am an emerging markets guy. So you have not only cannabis chaos, but you've got Colombian chaos, and I can say that because I feel like I've invested there on the Colombian chaos in the oil and gas industry, which was they've got some of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world no one's ever heard of. I mean, I worry about governance risks. I worry about who really owns the assets, and so that's a case where I guess I don't feel like I have to go there right now, even though I have certainly owned companies that had exposure there, but it wasn't really what I was banking on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perry Miele, the chairman of Benzinga Capital, that took a major stake in Benzinga. We interviewed him when we were down there, and he had a really good question for me, and I wanted to actually convey this to basically everybody I interviewed. But the question was, give me the number one reason why you should still invest in cannabis. What would you say to that?
It's a massive industry that is uninvested. At this point, it's you can make an argument that it's the size of beer, wine, and spirits, and there's this institutional wall capital that is not here yet, and it will be here, and it will be sophisticated consumer products, CPG, et cetera. Some overused terms and some terms that don't really even half the people that are using them don't understand what it actually means. But this isn't a demand issue, okay? And the cyclicality that we're seeing on inflation and price deflation and smaller basket sizes and things that every retailer deals with are not a function of proof of concept. I mean, the plant is under-researched, under-discovered.
Yeah.
It is like anything. It requires regulation. It requires consistency, and it requires time. this will take time, and it's taking time. And we've all been having this conversation together for 5 years. We're going to have it, I'm sure, in another 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're going to be farther down the road. It's not going to happen overnight.
Agreed. So many things even I've learned where it's like the focus was basket size a year ago, where now it's terpenes, and hiring the big Hollywood influencer is doing nothing. The bud tenders are the influencers now. And it's the maturity of an industry. But listen, appreciate the time. Good luck with your Rangers in the series. And Anthony, we got to check out his bar in West Village next time we're in New York City. I think that's the real reason why I was on here today, is just to put a few plugs.
Yeah, well, look, man, and you know, you're not getting any free drinks out of me for this, Jack. You know, but I know. But the nice thing about a good gin mill is you don't go there because the bartender's giving you every third or fourth one for free. You go there because you love the place. You love how it feels.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you,
you got any game day specials? Game day specials?
Game day specials are the TV's on only when there's a sporting event on. Otherwise, we turn it off. And we've got the best jukebox in the city. So WXOU Radio Bar is the bar, and we welcome our friends north and south to come on in.
That's sweet. Listen. Appreciate the time. Always great.
All right, guys.
Touching base.
Great conversation. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.